Hey everybody, this is Josh Runquist here. I think I got better settings going on for my camera right now, being able to use some natural sunlight going on. I think I look decent despite having the ugly mug, and it's now time to talk about the top 10 albums of 1998 in my humblest of opinions. And coming in at number 10 is Converge with their debut album, When Forever Comes Crashing. And I categorize this as first wave metalcore. Some people may agree with that, some may have never thought of that before, and some will highly disagree. But this is my feeling behind it. I feel like Converge was one of the first bands to really nail that metalcore sound of what it was originally supposed to be about. Heavy metal meets hardcore. And of course they add a little bit more to it as well. They have some mathcore elements going on. They have some extreme moments going on as well. I mean, that's of course throughout the entire Converge discography, and that's a part of their charm. But this first album feels like it's the most raw album, because they were still trying to figure out who they were. And they nailed so much of who they were on this first album. And of course, it got grander and grander as time got on. The production got better. The songwriting ability got even stronger. But there's something about this first album that can't be messed with. It feels like this was the album to be made of this style at the perfect time. And this album went on to form so many new bands because of influences. And of course, some albums that would come later from Converge, which I guarantee will be a part of this series later. But yeah, this is one of those albums that I highly recommend if you've never checked out a band like Converge before, and see if it's for you. And even if it's not, hey, at least you gave it a shot. Coming in at number 9 is the self-titled debut from Liquid Tension Experiment, and it's everything that you would imagine it would be. What would become 3/4 of Dream Theater and Tony Levin on bass. You really can't ask for much more than that. It's super cheesy if you like progressive metal. It's highly wankery. I mean, everyone in this band shows off more than probably necessary, but that's the fun of it. You don't go into this looking for the greatest music ever made. You're looking for everyone in this band to shred, write some cool music, and hey, once in a while they do play live. And, maybe that'll happen again. I mean, what was LTE3 like a couple years ago? It could still happen again. Maybe there'll be LTE4. Coming in at number 8 is Sentenced with Frozen. And this is definitely the era where the band truly became their real form. If you know of Sentenced before, you know that they started off as a Finnish death metal band and became much more gothic as every subsequent album would go on. And I really find that was really the best. Like, I love the death metal era of Sentenced, but I love the true form gothic era of Sentenced so much more. The vocals are impeccable on this album. Ville's second album here really shows that he's getting much more comfortable, and it's only going to get better from here on out. And the songs, for that reason, keep getting stronger. The production's better. It just feels like the band's really coming into their own and becoming a different entity than what they used to be, but so much stronger because of it. And if you want some of that classic 90s gothic metal, not death metal, gothic metal, I highly recommend checking out Frozen. Coming in at number 7 is one of the most extreme albums that I've had so far in this entire series, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart. The band Exhumed with gore metal. Yes, the debut album from Exhumed is that perfect culmination of what death metal and grindcore can sound like in perfect symphonic harmony, and it creates gore metal. The lyrics are absolutely outrageous in the best way possible. The production on the original release is a bit hard to listen to, but if you like the music and you want a better version of it, they did re-release it with a better mix and mastering. And I actually got to talk to Matt Harvey for that release, so I highly recommend checking out that interview, plus checking out that version of the album. The songs are so good. It's got that great, fast, crazy, chaotic, extreme feeling behind it. But if you like, let's say, B-grade horror movies, this is a band that you need to fall in love with. Seriously, everything about Exhumed, just perfect. And number 6 is one of my favorite hard rock bands of all time, Clutch, with the Elephant Riders. It still blows my mind, because I got into Pure Rock Fury, which I will most likely be talking about later in this series, first. And I got into this album much, much later. And I always thought that this album came out after Pure Rock Fury. Boy, was I wrong. Because Pure Rock Fury has that great heavy fuzz tone going on throughout of it. It's probably the most rockin' album they've done outside of the album Earth Rocker, whereas the Elephant Riders feels a little more poppy, a little more alternative, a little more wackadoo. But it's also what I appreciate about it. I mean, the fact that they have an instrumental called Crackerjack, which features a fantastic trumpet solo where it will either make or break your love for the band, I guarantee it. Clutch is just able to be that fun band that they've always been. Of course, always left-leaning, which is what I appreciate about them, but they let the music do the talking for them. And of course, Neil Fallon adds when he needs to, as needed. But all of that said, I do feel like the Elephant Riders is really underrated unless you're really, really into Clutch, and I think it's a fantastic starter album if you're looking for just a fun, hard rock album with a lot of blues elements and, of course, that stoner rock feel that I can only appreciate from some bands, such as Clutch. At number 5, we have Arion with Into the Electric Castle. And I finally get to talk about one of my biggest musical heroes, Arjen Anthony Lucassen, who is the mastermind of Arion and so many other great projects. And of course, Arion is the biggest. It's the most grandiose. It's the most everything that Arjen ever stood for. Of course, there's other side ventures out there, but if you really want a good taste of what he's all about, Arion is that band. And I really felt like with the third album, Into the Electric Castle, is really where the band really became into its own, and this full-on project really started to pick up steam and become the great entity that it is now. Of course, it's another conceptual album. This is the first double-disc conceptual album for Arion, and it is kind of hard to get into if you're not into this style. I will admit that, but there is one particular standout song that I think even if you don't like the cheesiest of cheese, that is the progressive rock and progressive metal that Arjen is known for and I love so much, please do yourself a favor and check out the song Valley of the Queens. It is a very nice, subtle ballad. It's very short, but it's a beautiful song. I got to see this song live at Prog Power 2016, and I was so fortunate as that's probably the closest I'm ever going to get to seeing Arion live, and it's just a gorgeous song, and if you can appreciate that, I think you'll be able to find something to appreciate about the rest of the album, and hopefully from there, be able to appreciate everything that Arjen does and stands for. Of course, that might be a tall order if you're not into cheesy progressive metal, but hey, it's worth a shot, and please, just once again, just do yourself a favor, take 3-4 minutes out of your day, check out Valley of the Queens. Seriously, you'll thank me later. Coming in at number 4 is Blind Guardian with Nightfall in Middle-earth. This is either my second or third favorite Blind Guardian album. The brand new album is something that I feel is top tier Blind Guardian, even if some people don't agree with that. I think you're wrong for that, but hey, that's a discussion for a different time. For Nightfall in Middle-earth, it is, of course, just like what it sounds like. A concept album about Lord of the Rings. And that is not a bad thing. I mean, it can be a little cheesy for some people, but I think Blind Guardian does it in a way where it feels authentic to the band. You can tell that Hansi and company are very into what they're doing. The songs are structured in such a great way. I can understand that the segments that are not musical on this album can be a little grating if you're not into that kind of thing. If you just want to hear the music, you could probably take out half of the album, which I understand. But as a fan of Blind Guardian, I feel like this is just a perfect album from start to finish, and it just continues on from what Blind Guardian was doing in the past, and now being able to just do a full-on concept album about Lord of the Rings, and just showing off what the band is truly capable of. It's a high watermark for the band, and if you've never checked it out, I highly recommend you do. Coming in at number 3 is the final album from Death, The Sound of Perseverance. And this is the most polarizing Death album. For one, it wasn't written to be a Death album, it was written to be a Controlled Denied album. But Nuclear Blast did want them to try one more Death album, which Chuck begrudgingly did. But at the same time, I think he wrote some of the best songs that Death has ever created. And of course, this is my introduction to one of my favorite drummers of all time, Richard Christie, who starts off the album with one of the most insane drum fills you'll ever hear in your entire life. And then he just decides to continue doing more of that throughout the entire album. This album is absolutely insane. Chuck continues the more of the black metal screams more than the death growls, which is hit or miss for some people. For me, it's a huge hit. but I understand why it's not for everybody. Voice of the Soul is one of the most perfect guitar instrumentals ever made, and their cover of Painkiller is right up there with Judas Priest. Some say it's better, some say it's not as good. I'll let you be the judge of that for yourself. If you had to end Death, this was the perfect final album for the band. I am so sad that we never really got to see what Control Denied was going to be all about. Of course, they did release their only album, but we never did get that second album, and just to see what that progression would have been all about. I will always wish that Chuck was able to survive everything that he did with his cancer, but at least he left an amazing legacy. And if you want to hear me talk about more about Death, I did a backwards marathon on Death not too long ago, which you should go check out on this very channel. Coming in at number 2 and proving that he is the true original master of progressive death metal, it is the lone solo album from Dan Swano, Moontower. This is the literal definition of progressive death metal. It has progressive rock elements to it, it has death metal influences, and you can see what was going on with the progressive death metal thing. Of course, Nightingale was going on here with a little bit more of that gothic sound, and it would eventually become a little bit more like this, minus the vocals. Edge of Sanity was becoming closer and closer to this, and was still the true definition of progressive death metal until Opeth took that over, begrudgingly maybe, but I still feel like Edge of Sanity is the true leader of that. And Dan Swano was able to just combine these two elements in harmonies no other musician has ever been able to top. This is a very underrated album, and I never see it talked about enough, and I wish more people did. You can see so many elements of what future bands would take on later, what Dan Swano would be able to accomplish later, and is just an amazing album. And the fact that this was written in 98, when I was 10 years old, that's absolutely insane to me. And I love the fact that I can still go back to this and be able to enjoy every single second of it. And if you need some progressive death metal in your life that you may not be familiar with, I can't recommend Moontower enough. And of course, at number 1, as close as Moontower almost was number 1, I did have to give it to Opeth and My Arms, Your Hearse. What many people consider to be the first true Opeth album, as the first two albums were much more in the progressive black metal territories. Although Morning Rise started to get a little more death metal, but wasn't fully there yet, My Arms, Your Hearse was pure progressive death metal. And yeah, you can see a lot of Edge of Sanity influence in there. I mean, Michael Eickerfeldt and Dan Swano are friends. How could they not? But this is a concept album by Opeth that is very, very haunting, and it has some of the best Opeth songs ever. I mean, you got April Ethereal, you got When, you got obviously one of the biggest songs they've ever made with Demon of the Fall. I mean, there's so much to love about this album. Oddly enough, it's one of the shorter experiences from Opeth as well. I mean, they're so known for doing these long, very, very, very long songs. But on this album, it's a little more secured. It's a little shorter, it's a little more refined, and I appreciate it for that reason. It makes it stand out more. And of course, as a former drummer, I have to point out, with the debut of Martin Lopez on this album, and his signature 6/8 style, the do, you know, it's such a legendary beat that Opeth was known for such a long time in that progressive death metal era. And his drumming is just as synonymous with the sound as Michael Eickerfeldt's vocals. Fight me if you don't agree, down below in the comments. But yes, the first real Opeth album where they figured out the sound that they wanted to go for and were able to let it flourish for a decade. And what a decade that truly was. And there you go, folks, my top 10 albums of 1998. Looking back on it, I can't believe that 1998 is when I was 9 and 10 years old. It just blows my mind that was so far ago. 24 years ago, almost 25 years ago, depending on how you look at it, and absolutely mind-blowing to me. But we're already almost a third of the way through this entire series, and I thank you so much for checking this part out. And if you haven't checked out 88 through 97, you absolutely should. And until we get to the top 10 albums of 1999, or an interview, review, backwards marathon, top 10 list, or anything else that I decide to do, and for the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel, this is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.